Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another coloring. Last week, we did this beautiful triadic color combo coloring of a fairy. And this week, I want to show you something different. I picked a page from the grayscale section of the book, and today we're going to do the 3D render of this green iridescent beetle. We are, of course, still working in my brand new coloring book called It's Easy to Color, and I am working in the physical printed version of this book. As always, all of my books are available in print as well as PDF downloads. So I hope you have your copy ready to go. Let's color together. As always, when coloring in a physical book, I like to put a few sheets of regular printer paper behind the page that I'm working on. And on this one, I am going to start with white charcoal. This book is very unusual in that it's a printed book, yet it's printed on toned paper. It is the first of its kind where the pages are actually cream, so we can add lighter highlights here. The cream here, however, is quite pale, so you can treat it as white paper and not add any lighter highlights at all. But I think you will find that this white charcoal trick is quite attractive. If you don't own white charcoal, if you don't like working with it, this step can be done with a regular white pencil as well. I would recommend a white Prismacolor. So what I'm going to do in this step is I'm going to color everything that's the shiny shell of the beetle with a white pigment. I'm working gently in little smooth circles to create this shading effect. And I'm going over the areas that are blank as well as the areas that are gray. And notice that already the pigment is changing. There's a little bit of a bluish tint happening on the page. Another interesting thing that's happening on the screen that's completely unintended is that my 4K camera is picking up on the print pixels and is creating a little bit of an artifact. In real life, you can't see it. In fact, when I take a picture of this page, you can't see it at all. So I do apologize that there's a little bit of a shimmer on the gray part of the drawing. It is not there in real life. For our first color, we're going to pick a nice, vivid mid-tone green. What I mean by mid-tone is it's not too dark and it's not too light. It's right about in the middle of the value scale of this color. Value scales, color potential, picking pencils, knowing how to pick the right pencils and how to work with color combos is something that I teach in depth in my coloring course called How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro in the Academy. So those of you who have already gone through that course, which is a lot of people at this point, all of you already know what I'm talking about when I use terms like mid-tone or the value scale. If you haven't gone through that course yet, do check it out. Just swing by the Academy and it's literally the main course on the front page of the Academy. You can't miss it. For those of you just coloring along with me right now on YouTube, what I'm doing is I am very thoroughly coloring everything on the shell of this beetle that is tinted gray on the original illustration. I'm working with Prismacolors only on this coloring, and notice how beautifully they cover the gray, leaving a very clean pigment. Now, I didn't used to be a big fan of grayscale. Even though I love drawing it, I was never really crazy about using grayscale illustrations as teaching guides or offering them as coloring pages, and that has recently changed quite dramatically. I am now a pretty big fan of grayscale, especially with the improvements that Amazon has made to their paper. Back in the day when Bennett Klein was publishing his books in 2017, 18, 19, that era, I tried coloring in his books and I had the most horrible experience with color bleeds, with not being able to layer my Prismacolors nicely over the gray. And I am very pleasantly surprised that this paper today has come a long way from those days of smearing and very intrusive grayscale illustrations. Today I'm able to layer over this gray freely. It's not at all mudding my color. It's not muting my color. The grayscale is guiding me on where to place my pigment, but the pigment itself is very strong and very clean. And as you saw in the beginning of the show, you saw the finished version of this already. It looks 100% real. It looks totally 3D and very vivid. In fact, one of the things that I'm completely blown away with this new and improved Amazon paper is how bright and vibrant my colors are coming out. So I highly recommend that you do give the printed book version a shot if you haven't done so already. I know that a lot of people are put off by the concept of Amazon paper because it has acquired such a horrible reputation over the past few years. But working in this book right now, I can tell you that all of that has changed quite dramatically. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me if you buy the Amazon book or the PDF book. I offer two versions of every book, printed and PDF. So there's absolutely no reason for me to push the printed version onto you. In fact, I get paid more if you guys buy the PDF versions. So I should be encouraging you to buy those. But the truth is, I want you guys to have an amazing experience. And so far, I've had an incredible experience coloring in this book, and I want to share that with you. So do give it a shot and let me know what you think. Now, our beetle shell is nicely primed with the mid-tone green. Let's bring in a darker green. What I'm doing with my dark green is shading everything that appears a little bit darker on the shell of the beetle already. And I'm working again very gently, very smoothly, sometimes in little strokes and sometimes in little circles, blending in with the colors that I already established. Notice also that every once in a while I bring that previous pencil back. So if I see that there's too much of my dark green and my gradient is too sharp from dark green to white, then I come in with my mid-tone green again and smooth that transition out. Gradient transitions and how to make them is also something that I teach in my How to Use Colored Pencils Like a Pro course. And I'm going to apply this dark green effect to the rest of the shell of this beetle. Now that the green work is done, let's bring in a nice dark ultramarine blue. And we're going to create a gradient transition from his pincers out there to the top of his shell. The effect that we're going for with this beetle is iridescence. And some of the colors that are featured in iridescence are bright emerald green and deep ultramarine blue. And as a fun fact, iridescence is something that I teach in my gemstones course, totally unrelated to beetles, but the complete guide to coloring gemstones has one chapter on iridescence where we apply it to pearls. So those of you who have gone through those courses can apply what you've learned to things other than gemstones and pearls, as you can see with this beetle coloring. Another example of iridescence would be in peacock feathers and some butterflies. And because it's a gradient transition of this blue, I'm going to trail the blue effect down from the top of our beetle face down to about midway of his wing covers. And this is a stronger, deeper, darker color than the greens we've been using so far. So I'm adding it in these pools of pigment to the darkest elements again. The other thing that you may notice on this coloring is that I'm already adding a little bit of texture. I am free-handing these little dots. A lot of grayscale coloring pages already offer you enough information, but it's not enough to just lightly tint the grayscale page. You do have to build up a lot of these elements yourself. I like to make my grayscale as light as possible with as much of empty space as possible so that my tinting is not interfering with your coloring in any way. And if you're using high-end wax colored pencils such as Prismacolor, you should have no problem confidently coloring over this grayscale and even adding your own effects. Now, I'm going for a very 3D look on this beetle, so I want to make sure that there is high contrast on this shell and a lot of texture. And notice that with each new color that I add, I always also bring in the previous colors that I've used for a smoother blending effect. Now let's have some fun with vibrance. I am going to bring in something obscenely toxic green, like a chartreuse or a lime green. And this is going to be a very light but vivid and vibrant green. And I'm going to create a gradient of this light vibrance from the bottom of the wings up. And it's in these gradient transitions that the iridescent effect really comes through. When I did the fairy on the last episode of coloring in this book, I talked a lot about how impressed I am with this paper and its ability to handle layers. On this project, once again, I am layering very heavily, and so far I haven't hit a limit of where the paper can't handle any more pigment yet. So again, not very thick paper, probably not marker friendly, not marker proof, but very friendly with layering of wax pencils. And as we discovered last week, also extremely friendly with even acrylic paint. For my lighter highlights, I am bringing in a lemon yellow, a chartreuse yellow would also work here, or any kind of a pale citrusy yellow will work. And if you feel it's needed, you can also bring in your white Prismacolor pencil and touch up those highlights even further. Now, a little bit more work on the hard parts of the beetle. I'm going to come in with some browns and burgundies. Blend with something like sand or cream or pale yellow. And increase my contrast with black. Additionally, with this black, I am increasing the contrast of the colors of the shell. As I teach in many of my courses and lessons, high contrast is even more important than color vibrance. High contrast allows us to see things as more defined, and it's especially important in effects like iridescence, metallic effects, and glow effects. If we want something to look shiny and crisp, high contrast is the key. So don't be afraid to add that pure black. Even though our beetle shell is green, it's important to have these pools of pure darkness contrasted by pools of nearly white. And because it's iridescence, it's always good to bring in a little bit of sky blue, of mid-tone blue. It's just one of those effects that we see in iridescence. Skipping forward about 2 hours into this coloring, I've done some gold effect magic on this page, but we're not going to concern ourselves with that for the purposes of this lesson on the iridescent shell. What I do want to focus on at this stage is the white gel pen. I am bringing in my white gel pen for pure highlights and texture. I've added these white gel elements to the golden heart already, and now I'm adding tiny white dots to the shell. And notice how I'm adding them. I'm adding them to the pools of light that are already established on the shell, with more dots in the center where it's lighter, and feathering them out with fewer and fewer dots in the periphery. Additionally, I'm adding occasional random dots to the darker part of the shell. And this accomplishes two things. One, it creates the highest possible contrast that we can accomplish because we now have pure black and pure white on the same element. And two, it created a suggestion of texture on our beetle. So now we can imagine that the beetle is not simply three-dimensional and shiny and iridescent and very colorful, but if we were to run our fingers over this shell, we would feel that it's a little bit textured. And that is a very cool effect. It took just a few seconds to add those dots with a white gel pen, but the difference is huge. To bring everything together, I completed this coloring all in yellow and golden tones. I think this green shell stands out gorgeously against the pale yellow light. If you're interested in getting access to the full 3-hour recording of this project with every single color called out, to see me do the golden effect, the glowing rose window effect behind the beetle, and of course the shimmery wings and the golden heart, I will be sharing that full recording with my coloring club patrons in February. That will be our Valentine's Day project with the golden heart. So if you're interested in full recordings, please consider joining me on Patreon, specifically in the Coloring Club, where every month I share a very long recording calling out every single color. I hope you had fun with this coloring. I hope you will give this green iridescent beetle a shot. If you haven't gotten a copy of my It's Easy to Color book, please consider getting it either in print or as a PDF download, and swing by the Academy. It's completely free to join. You can watch all the free preview lessons that you can handle in a day. There are a ton of them there. Join our community, join our Discord channel, and just hang out and share your projects until perhaps you're ready to join a course or two. I am constantly coming out with new content, and I'm very happy to have you with me. I'll see you in the next video. Bye!